știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume утреннего стяг в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак, и вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весь летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы, будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И он продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Снегопад
Hello, everybody, and welcome along. It is the evening, or I should say the late afternoon of the 15th of July 2026, and coming to you with a live stream because, of course, my internet issues have finally been resolved. So I'm able to come to you in glorious 1080p. So enjoy that. So what we're going to be talking about today, for the main part, is the topic of the show, which is against defeatism. But I would be remiss in my duties as a resident of perfidious Albion, or I should say, perfidious Albion's northern occupied section, that is Scotland. And that would be to comment upon the departure of the dimwit in chief, the girdle strapped bucket of lard, the croaking, squawking, tinny voiced, mustard brained buffoon that masquerades as a leader, and that would be Keir Starmer. He has now gone. He has vanished into the ether amidst a shower of appreciation from the collection of pork-brained dimwits in the House of Commons, all of whom wept and wailed to see him go, despite the fact that they all conspired against him, that is, his Labour Party colleagues, to see him off with a knife in his back a couple of weeks ago. I do love a show of loyalty. I don't know about you. Now he departs for pastures new. Maybe he's going to be the NATO Secretary General going around the world saying, "I really like you to buy some American weapons." Or maybe he's going to grace the red benches of the House of Lords. Maybe he's going to see out his days bursting out of his girdle, swilling down port and lemon, complaining about his gout, and babbling something about Ukrainian builders. Who knows? The world truly is his oyster. But the thing I wanted to say about Sir Keir is that he really does embody all of the worst aspects, not of the British bourgeoisie. He isn't of that class, but of the British, peculiarly English, new petty bourgeoisie, meaning the officialdom, meaning those who earn a very good salary serving the state. Keir Starmer is very much one of them. He is a man with no brain. He is a man with no imagination. He is a man with no charisma. He is a man with no humor, no wit, no intelligence, no gravitas, no nothing. He is a rubber stamp, as I've said before, in human form. He is a man who defined himself by doing the dirty work of the British state, covering things up, making sure that certain cases didn't go to trial, making sure that certain cases did. In the case of Julian Assange, he is a man who, when it was required, pushed for fake cases or over-exaggerated cases to be brought against people like Assange, but made sure court cases didn't go anywhere in the case of Jimmy Savile. We all can speculate as to why. He is a revolting, disgraceful, reactionary, buffoonish, empty, brainless man who squawks in that god-awful scritchy voice of his when he thinks he's being statesmanlike and wants to make a point. Squawks away about how I changed the Labour Party. I stopped anti-Semitism. Of course, all of this is a confection. Starmer's whole career is a state-sponsored confection. There's nothing real about any of it. Let's take his enormous general election triumph back in 2024, only 2 years ago. So after 2 years in power, a man who says, "I've got a great mandate," a man who claims that he's changed the Labour Party, that he has an agenda that everybody has endorsed, he's being chased out of office. He's gone. That's it. 2 years is all he lasted. Why? Because his beloved parliamentary colleagues, who were all weeping and wailing to see him go today, they all looked at the opinion polls, saw that the Greens were breathing down their necks from the left, and that they were going to lose a chunk of votes to Reform as well, putting them squarely in the shit and threatening their jobs. And there's nothing will focus an MP's mind faster than the prospect of losing access to his or her expense account and having to go out into the real world again. God knows they don't want to do that. And so they knifed old Sir Keir As soon as the opinion polls read consistently badly for them, they chucked him over the side. And why do the opinion polls read consistently badly for them? They read consistently badly for them because they are despised. The Labour Party is despised everywhere, other than like a few sections of the London petty bourgeois media operators. They are despised. The 9 million people who voted for them last time, which, by the way, is around about 500,000 fewer votes than they got under the leadership of Corbyn, where they suffered a historic, terrible defeat in 2019. Starmer then wins with 9,708,000 votes in 2024 compared to Corbyn's 10,269,000. He was rewarded, Starmer was, by the electoral system because the Tory vote just totally collapsed. It got scalped by Reform, which is why Reform were deployed, in why Farage was brought back and given a lot of coverage and created all over again in 2019. Starmer is a complete concoction. He is not popular. He won a very small number of votes, comparatively speaking, in 2024. Yeah, we're told, massive mandate. No, he was rewarded by a maneuver of the establishment in the electoral system. He was never, ever popular. Nobody out there in the real world likes this piece of shit. No one ever did. That's why he's going. Because even a disgraceful individual like Tony Blair, who I grew up hating, still do, but even he, for a while, did have a good degree of popularity. He was a far better politician, still is a far better, more skillful politician than that wooden dirge Keir Starmer. But he was popular for a good long while. And even though he was responsible for the Labour Party's rapid decline, he did have a degree of popularity. Starmer never had that. Because again, Starmer is the latest leader that offers reformism without reforms. And why would that be popular? All of his attempts to appear statesmanlike just made him look ridiculous. All his attempts to appear personable came across as fake because he's not personable. He's as personable as a middle manager in a civil service department, which, trust me, is not personable, barely even human. And this guy is the British state security bureaucracy in human form. And of course, a lot of the tributes paid to him today were all about, your leadership on Ukraine, your leadership on Ukraine. He did the same thing that Boris Johnson did on Ukraine, which is that he continued to shout and squawk over and over again about Britain backs Ukraine, Britain backs Ukraine. What do they really mean by that? Well, they mean that the British conspire constantly to make sure that the Ukrainian oligarchical dictatorship, which is what Ukraine is, and by the way, has always been. It's ever since their independence in 1991, it's been ruled by a collection of oligarchs who conspire against each other to see who can asset strip the country the quickest. Sometimes the oligarchy favored Russia. Sometimes they favored the West. Ultimately, they went with the West because there was more opportunities for cashing in the West. The Ukraine is run by a disgusting, rapacious oligarchy who, in order to make sure that they can stash their money in the West and get access to capital from the United States, Britain, France, and Germany, were prepared to essentially sacrifice the whole nation in a war against Russia that they could never possibly win. But of course, now they're not meant to win it. They're just meant to stand and die. So Keir Starmer just continued that process, as Andy Burnham, by the way, will continue that process. They're not hugging Zelensky because they like him. They're hugging Zelensky because it's a priority for British imperialism to continue the war, to try and inflict some kind of defeat on the Putin-led government in Russia. That's what it's about. It's like this sick, depraved nonsense they come out with about, we're back in Ukraine, or as Andy Burnham would say, I'm backing to Ukraine. Well, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're backing this oligarchical collection of kleptocrats who have ruled Ukraine since 1991 and have run it into the fucking ground and have stolen everything that's not nailed down. And when they wanted to steal more, they employed the services of fascists to aid them in doing so. The ridiculousness of all the cruelty of the British, French, German, and American ruling classes with regard to Ukraine, I would say it was astonishing, but they've done it plenty of times before. So farewell, Sir Keir. Maybe he'll fit in one last trip to Kiev. Maybe he can go and see the crater where Lindsey Graham visited a drone factory. More on Lindsey Graham in the Decline and Fall show coming to you very soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after. We'll be paying a fulsome tribute to the career of Lindsey Graham, the man who never saw a war he didn't want somebody else to die in. Well, there you go. So farewell, Sir Keir. Long may you rot on the benches of the House of Lords, burbling something every now and again about, like I say, Kiev, Girdle, before finally being found, perished due to an acute fit of gout and apoplexy on the red benches of the House of Lords, and being buried in the traditional style in underneath the foundations of the Crown Prosecution Service headquarters, which the way he would have wanted it. Remember, everyone, he was a man of the people. His father was a tool shed and his mother was a hospital. He is a common man, a man of the millennium. He was always in touch with those who mattered the most. And those who always mattered the most for him were the secret services, the heads of the army, and, of course, the CIA. Goodbye, Sir Keir. It's been an honour and a privilege, but please don't come back. Next up, Andy Burnham, who'll do all the same things, but in a generic Northwest Scouse Mancunian corridor accent, and who is slightly better at playing the common man. Not that much better, though. So, that dispatches Sir Keir. He's off to presumably, I don't know, go and drink his way into oblivion whilst screaming at the television tonight. Now, here we turn to the subject at hand, which is against defeatism. Now, I wanted to do this because I think that there are two issues to address here. The first is the predominance of what I'm going to call amongst the leftist and multipolar grifter circuit, the shit shovelers, the people who want to spoon feed their audience either wild optimism or utter despair, often within the same program. And these people's influence is ridiculous, given that they are unserious, given that they are swinging wildly between two polar opposites, but are in actual fact very much related to each other. And the general air of defeatism in the imperialist countries, which I am exposed to and which others are exposed to as well. There is a belief out there, and this comes from a lack of theoretical development, and we'll get to that in just a moment, that there is going to be, that because things are getting worse, there should automatically be some sort of revolt. Oh, why don't the workers revolt? I hear people cry about 5, 6, 7 times a day. And, of course, workers do revolt constantly in strikes and small-scale demonstrations, but there's nothing like a sort of nationwide revolt a lot of the time. Now, there's very specific reasons for that, and you have to understand them in order to do something about it. And here's where I get to those who wail and cry, oh, we must do something. The situation is dreadful. We must do something. Let's vote Democrat, or let's vote Green or Labour or something like that. And that just, of course, keeps you on the merry-go-round forever. And that is perhaps its intention. Now, in order to actually understand why we are in the situation that we are in, one needs to actually understand the history of the working class movement in your particular country, the history of the communist parties in your particular country, the history of why all of these parties failed and or collapsed or became marginalized or just imploded, and why the level of class consciousness is so low. You need to understand all of these things. Because if you don't, when you try to do something, the thing you try to do will invariably be wrong. And so when I see clowns screaming, no time to read theory, bollocks to theory, as the anarchists used to say. And the anarchists can say bollocks to theory because they don't have any, other than perhaps the racist ravings of Proudhon, or the pro-Confederate ravings of Mikhail Bakunin, or the pro-Epstein dribblings of Noam Chomsky. There's very little anarchist theory, but you see it from all these like supposed leftists. I don't need theory, I just need to do something, action now, we must have action. And then when the action doesn't work, oh God, everything is awful. No, you need to take the time to study a situation, to appreciate why things are as they are. I mean, there's an old phrase from Mao Zedong, no investigation, no right to speak. And that's undeniably true. It's like, if you haven't investigated the problem, shut the fuck up and go and investigate it. Otherwise, just shut the fuck up. Because what we don't need is more dismal dribblings from people who can't be asked to do some basic research. But here is the problem. Like, it takes time and effort to actually not just learn the theory, but learn how to apply Marx's method in carrying out analysis. It takes time and a degree of energy to do that. Now, some people find that hard to find, that degree of time and energy. But if you're supposedly committed to some kind of revolutionary change, then you better find the time and you better find the energy. Otherwise, everything you do is worthless. And it's not to say that you must spend all day reading a book, and because Marx himself and the other great Marxists who followed him spent his time figuring out how to apply his method in his interventions in real world politics. So must we. But we must learn the method and continually upgrade our understanding of this method and learn how to apply it and learn from our mistakes. See, this is what we must do. Because if you understand the history of, say, the British or English, Scottish, Welsh, Irish, or French or German or American working class movement, then you will understand why it is in the situation that it is in today. What we have is a perfect storm, in a sense that the ruling class is becoming weaker. They are not just going to go away. They're not just going to say, you know what, capitalism's failed now, we give up. No, they're desperately trying to reinvigorate their system through more and more aggressive acts of imperialism. This is why you see Trump saying, "Yeah, we're going to take over the streets of music. We're going to take it a little, and we're going to charge." That kind of thing. Why you see the Americans trying to bomb Iran into submission again, and they'll fail again. That's not going to work. So you've got this situation where the working class suffered historic defeats in the 70s and the 1980s, and you end up with a situation where the ruling class have had many decades of having it their own way. They have tried systematically to erode and destroy class consciousness, which they can't do that entirely, because class consciousness is continued recreated by their own attacks. And they have tried to disperse and dissolve working class organization. They've tried to atomize the working class as much as they possibly can, because they understand the dangers when the reforms and the concessions of the welfare capitalist period are being removed piece by piece. It doesn't happen all at once, but it happens slowly over many years. When you have a situation where the economy is very parasitic and also stagnant, you have a situation where life for more and more workers is undeniably getting harder. Well, then you don't want them to be able to be organized. You don't want them to be able to understand their situation. You want to be able to perpetually distract them and throw things in the way of them organizing themselves, of them regaining a degree of class consciousness that would help them to understand their situation properly. This, you have to understand everything that the ruling class is trying to do. The ruling class is faced with a difficult situation. They have created, that is the ruling class in the West. They have created a globalized system of wealth extraction, where profits are extracted in a lot of the time in oppressed nations and funneled back through the financial centers of imperialism. And that has led to a situation where the economies of imperialism became, as Lenin prophesied, more and more parasitic. And this is the nature of the political economy today. So the economy is more and more parasitic. This leads them into the problem that they have, which is that they're due to the fact that they have globalized and deindustrialized, due to the fact that the profit generation comes from financial maneuverings and investments overseas, and the economy at home is parasitic, inefficient, and suffers from historically low levels of investment. So hence the only real way out for them, without fundamentally changing things, which they don't want to do and in many ways can't do, is to try and, as we've covered here many times before, try and destroy and be able to loot any other country, certain other countries. Namely, Russia is the guiding obsession of the British ruling class. That's the one they want to destroy, an asset strip. They would love to do it to China as well, but that is too tough a nut to crack at the moment. And I think it will remain too tough enough for the Americans or the British or anybody else to crack. So they're in the situation where they need to destroy and asset strip other nations, and not just any nations, the big ones. They have a lot of capital that they need to be able to invest in nations that can be asset stripped. Again, this is what faces Russia. It's what faces Iran. It's what they're trying to do with the measure of success in Venezuela. It's what they want to do to Cuba. But Cuba and Venezuela are prizes, but Iran is a bigger prize. Russia is a far bigger prize. China is the biggest prize of all. So they need to destroy these countries, but they can't do it in the conventional way, which is what you would do to like 160 years ago, which is send in the gunboats. If you try and do that directly, you'll end up in a war you can't win, because it's a war that, as has been admitted to many times by British military officials, you don't have the men, you don't have the production capacity to actually win. So you end up with this situation where they're trying to win a proxy war with the Russians via the cruel farce that they've imposed on the Ukrainians, cruel and bloody farce. At the same time, they're trying to convince their own population that they need to sacrifice in order to rebuild the war industry, which will never get rebuilt. It won't. I will venture into the realm of predictions now. The US, under late stage imperialism, or late capitalism, perhaps that's a better term to use, the US and Britain under late capitalism will not be able to rebuild their war industries anything like the amount that they would require for actually taking on the Russians, never mind the Chinese. It's a ridiculous, ridiculous dream. They keep making these assertions that, if you read the statement from the latest NATO summit, it's ridiculous. It's like, we will stand with iron firmness behind Article 5. Okay, well, why would you need Article 5? Russians ain't attacking anybody in NATO, nor are they going to either. And so they know that the Russians aren't going to do that. So they know that Article 5 will never be called upon. But they screech about it anyway to make themselves look as if they're doing something. Then they say, well, we will have a NATO-wide effort around arms production. Okay, well, you've been saying that there's going to be a NATO-wide effort for 4 years now, and the timescales keep shifting back to from 2025 to 2026 to 2030 to 2035. So what, a decade from now? 9 years from now? And the reason why I'm going into this is because this is the situation the imperialists are in. They have created a situation where everything's financialized. The industrial core is hollowed out. They have like bits of industry left around like high-tech production, because that's the plan that part of the plan that they went with. They were deindustrializing en masse. They were sending loads of industry in the past to China and other Southeast Asian nations. They were retaining what they regarded as their natural advantages, which was high-tech production. But now that's been revealed to not be enough. So in order to retain their credibility, which means their ability to look as if they can actually wage war, they're now trying to throw money at defense to restore credibility. And it won't work. It won't work. The system's too far gone. Unless, of course, they want to try and impose a full-blown fascist regime to reduce the wages of the working class to nothing, and then say that, well, now we can revive ourselves, so we don't have to pay the working class anything. But that would lead, of course, to a widespread resistance, which they've been trying to avoid. So this is the situation as things stand. We have a globalized system where production is largely done elsewhere, where there are small centers of production in an imperialist country, where the imperialists have realized that they're running into greater and greater trouble, and they realize that their entire economies being entirely non-productive is creating problems for them, but they can't reverse the process. If they throw in all kinds of money into trying to expand the production, all it'll do is it'll be soaked up by the various different shareholder groups. It'll be soaked up in payoffs to shareholders. It'll be soaked up by middlemen. What will happen to it is the same thing that happens to all budget expansions in the United States, Britain, France, Germany. But the United States and Britain are the worst for it, which is it'll disappear into a bloated bureaucracy. It'll disappear into the pockets of a whole bunch of middlemen. It'll disappear into the pockets of shareholders of major arms corporations. And the expansion of production will barely register. So they're in a hole. The problem that the ruling class has at the moment is that they have staggered into this crisis, which it's not easy for them to get out of, nor is it easy for their opponents to get out of it either. The Russian system is being strained by the fact that it contains within it a whole layer of parasites in the form of the Russian capitalist class, who, for all of their protestations about patriotism, orthodoxy, nation, sword, and all that shit, would drop the special military operation tomorrow if they could possibly get away with it and resume relations with the West on the footing that they previously had. And that consistent clash within the Russian ruling circles is producing the conflicted and contradictory policies of the Kremlin. But more on that on another day. If you want full details of that, go and watch the Russia series on Russian Bonapartism that you can find on a playlist on the YouTube page. Anyway, back to the ruling classes here. They are in an increasing crisis. They are going to need to carry out more and more attacks on the working class, but at the same time are afraid to wage the kind of class war that would perhaps reinvigorate the system if they manage to pull it off, which I don't think they can. So we're in a situation where the ruling classes have been weakened, where their authority has been weakened, where the systems which used to deliver their rule at least the appearance of legitimacy in the eyes of significant sections of the working class, those are all, in reputational terms, in the toilet. So their rule now is, in many respects, weaker than it has been for generations. In fact, almost, I would say, weaker than it ever has been. Weaker than it was to some extent after World War I or World War II. Because then they were able, after World War II, they were able to engage in reforms. They can't do that now. There's no capacity to do so. It's all too parasitic. So their actual system is in a deep hole. The problem is that our side the side of the working class, whether you're in the United States, in Britain, France, wherever, um, because of historic defeats and also the legacy of incredibly poor leadership in all countries, stemming from like the dreadful mistakes of the communist parties post 1945 and the dreadfulness of social democracy, and that legacy has left us in a situation where the working class essentially has either very poor or no leadership, and you have very low class consciousness. So whereas you can see the ruling class becoming more and more paranoid and raving about threats everywhere and banning more entities and proclaiming that they're going to lock more people up to preserve democracy and stuff like that. At the same time, the working class organization is still very, very weak. But the ruling class realize, or some of them realize, they're in a very weak position themselves, and thus are becoming more and more. They screech and demand action from the state to ban this, to ban that, to lock more people up. In the end, it won't work because every time they try and move to assert their authority, yes, it might lock a few people up, it might disturb some organizations, it might intimidate some people, but it can't stop the general trend, which is against them. Now, reasons for revolutionary optimism, therefore, lie in this. We are faced with a crisis, which is a crisis of historic low levels of class consciousness in larger sections of the proletariat and low levels of organization when it comes to actual communist parties. This is all our problem and a problem that we must resolve. But the ruling class also faces huge problems and huge contradictions that they can't resolve. So what we have to do, first of all, we have to make sure we study the method of Marx, the method of scientific socialism. We have to make sure that we continually study it to properly understand it and apply it. But also, we must start to take steps towards practical organization, meaning talking to workers in your workplace, in your community, starting to build where we are and however we can. With a view, though, that it's going to take a while, but it might be speeded up by certain external events. But given the general weakness of the authorities, given the fact that the working class, even if the working class draws incorrect and reactionary conclusions for now, the working class despises the political system, despises the politicians, hates the established parties. Well, all of that is material that we can work with, even if the people who are gaining at the moment are, sock dems on the one hand, reactionaries on the other. The general trend of history is actually going in our favor, but we need the organizations, we need the understanding, we need to build enough cadre to be able to take advantage of these situations when they present themselves. So in terms of the actual strength of the ruling class, in terms of what they've really relied on to preserve their rule, which is their ability to reform at the right time, their ability to buy off certain sections of the working class, and the general recognition of legitimacy of the system by large sections of the working class, certainly in the post-World War II era, all of that is going away. And so, whereas like people say, "Oh, why isn't there a revolt? Why isn't there this? Why isn't there that?" A lot of people who say that have a pathetically infantile understanding of like, well, what revolts actually are. They've got like images in their mind of like storming the Winter Palace and stuff like that, which it was a heroic event when it happened, even though more people died in the recreation of it by Sergei Eisenstein than actually died on the day itself. Interesting enough, stuff there, but. Taking part in even in the low level in the building of working class organization, be it in workplace or in the community, advocating for the building of real communist parties, advocating for the self-activity of the working class, advocating for ultimately the rule of the working class. These are things which are not easy to do, but living in a late capitalist society, you can feel the hunger of people for something different. Now, at the moment, that's shooting in all kinds of different directions. not in our directions because we don't have the sufficient level of organization. But it can go in our direction once we have a sufficient level of organization. And it's that we have to work on. And that is partly theoretical and partly practical. Now, I will not listen to or take lectures from anybody who is not seriously engaged in either of those aspects. If you're going to run around screaming, "Oh, we're fucked, we're fucked, we're fucked," when you're doing nothing other than saying "we're fucked" on YouTube, then you're not worthy of being listened to. If you're, compromising with reactionaries, or some people are, or you are proclaiming that now we need to go and vote for the Democrats again, or vote for the Labour Party again, or vote for the Greens, then you're a fool who should probably read more. This is the nature of things. There's not going to be, in the immediate period ahead, the chance for revolutionary action, as people would see it. But there is the opportunity to actually build things. But you can only build things with a proper understanding of the situation that we are in. If you don't have that, then you will fall prey to the wild hysteria that is on offer from the various charlatans online. Right. So more about this as time goes on. I hope you enjoyed the tribute to Keir Starmer. We will miss him. We have some questions. Right. Edward says, would you say that the way Marx and Lenin wrote about and described and analysed the classes of society is still relevant in 2026, or the Western masses morphed into something else? Well, what else could they morph into? Fundamentally, the composition of the working class changes by profession, by income level, etc. But fundamentally, there are the classes in society that are either the consumers and the controllers of surplus value, and those who produce it. There are those who produce wealth and those who consume it and control it. And then you have the small part in the middle, which is the actual petty bourgeoisie. So the working class in the West hasn't morphed into anything else. It's still, the class structure is still, lumpens, proletarians, petty bourgeois, and bourgeois. That's still the class structure. It hasn't morphed into anything else. It's just gone through so many years of defeats and poor leadership that it doesn't. That its action level is actually quite low. But there have been moments when it, even in the last 15 years, even in my living memory, when it's rumbled into life. And then what's happened is it's generally been sold out by the leadership of the trade union movement, who are as dedicated as the ruling class themselves into making sure that worker militancy doesn't break out again. So no, the working class in the West hasn't morphed into anything else. The analysis of class done by Marx, Engels, and Lenin is still relevant. This is still what we are dealing with here, and you can still learn much from understanding the method that all three of them use to analyze different societies. So this view that you get from, I'm not saying that this is Edward's view, by the way, so I'm not having a go at you, but this view from like fucking Yanis Varoufakis about, we're in techno-feudalism now. That's just a fucking buzzword. It's meaningless. Like if you look at like Yanis Varoufakis' argument that, the new tech means now we have people paying digital rent and they're all digital serfs. It's like, no, the digital technology, the way in which it is used is basically the same as every other technological wave that's come since the mid-19th century when Marx was writing. Every single wave has had the same effect generally, which is big number of people laid off when the new technology comes in. The capitalists then reorganize their industries, integrate the new technology, profit levels go up, partly because of the level of productivity that comes from applying a new technology. Then they employ a whole new load of people on in lower skilled jobs and on lower wages to work with the new technology. That's the way this has worked for 150, 160 years. That's the that's the way that tech is applied. The AI stuff is no different. And first of all, like AI just trawls through a lot of it just trawls through like work done by humans and regurgitates stuff. It's very good at quickly producing things, and of course, it enables the capitalists to make job cuts, which is what they've been doing in the United States and elsewhere. But in the belief that it's going to regenerate their system and give them a new few years of profit, it isn't so far. It's just a gigantic bet that won't pay off anything like that they think it will. Just as 26 years ago, like the investment in the internet companies called the dot-com bubble, that didn't lead to a long-term stabilization for capitalism either. From the dot-com bubble to the collapse in 2008 was barely 8 years. So what we're facing, the ruling class is facing, is crises that come closer together and have become sort of perma crises in the West, which there's no way out of. That's the thing. Mao was surrounded by teenagers. Red Star over China. Yes, indeed. Like, look, there's this. You need to have working class youth on your side. Yes, you do. But you can't only have that. Like there were, a lot of the early communist parties in the East, particularly in the Chinese, were based on very young people because Marxism was relatively new to China. But you do need more experienced people as well because youth has a lot of energy. And I remember 20 years ago getting active in politics for the first time and running in all kinds of useless directions. So your energy can be misplaced. But yes, you need working class youth. And by the way, you don't need a special language to talk to people like below the age of 25. They're perfectly capable of actually understanding you if you just use speak plainly. There's this fucking mentality that some people have, like, oh, we need a special language to talk to the youth. No, you don't. You just need to speak to them as intelligent beings, which a lot of them are. And if you do that, some will respond to it, some won't. At the moment, only a minority are going to respond to us. We're not in the aftermath of the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 to 18. You're not going to have like thousands of young workers like suddenly looking up and seeing the red star in the sky, figuratively speaking, and running off to join the nearest communist party. But we will find a few people who are going to be promising, who will want to actually learn, who will want to actually put the lessons into practice. This is the way of things. At the moment, we're going to be recruiting a minority of people, but we need people who are young and have the energy. But also, we need people with experience. There's many different roles to be played in a communist party. Right. Hello to Marius, Camden Cobain, and Tim Gray. Hello to Akhmadovich in Moscow. Peep Show in London. Frank and Spiral Alice. Arnold. Wicked Witch of the Southeast in North Carolina. Wasn't Lindsey Graham the senator in South Carolina? Now because America is such a great democracy, his seat has been inherited by his sister, and they laugh at North Korea. Hello to someone else in sunny Portugal. Hello to Walter Keating. Hello to Ben Horst. I think there is a situation that is ongoing in Kashmir. I've seen a lot of people like getting enthusiastic about it. I haven't had time to look into it. I'm hoping to be able to look into it by tomorrow and actually talk about it then. Hello, Almir in the once and future socialist Yugoslavia. Hello to V. Olafsdottir. Hello to Barney Boomer in British Columbia, Canada. Hello to Christopher Rogers in Hong Kong. who else we got here? We have Comrade Jawad, we have Karen, we have Terry Eaton over there on the Wirral. We have Cosmos Faber, we have Jenny on the smoking break at work. Jawad asked, one thing Starmer had made sure to do was, before he left, was to prescribe the IRGC. Has that been done? I believe so. I mean, it's again like there won't have much of an effect on the IRGC. I mean, maybe it will allow them to apply even more sanctions, but again, it's partly propaganda. You're trying to delegitimize like part of the Iranian state. They're trying to give themselves powers to lock up anybody who walks around with an IRGC T-shirt on, for instance. I don't know why you do that, but if you do, then you would be locked up. It's essentially primarily another tool of domestic repression, and an attempt to delegitimize the Iranian state won't really do them all that much good, to be honest. Marius says, I've heard we don't have time to read theory. We must do something for American leftists for 20 years. People spend literally years saying that they don't have time to read Marx. Imagine if all the years they spent saying that they don't have time to read Marx, they'd spent some of it reading Marx, Wicked Witch of the Southeast says, I'm removing myself from the voting rolls to be counted properly as those who do not vote. Yeah, in the United States, like those who do not vote are overwhelmingly, as far as I can see, from the poorer working class, which again shouldn't be a surprise. The working class aren't stupid. They can see when there's no stakes involved for them, and there's no stakes involved in an upcoming election between, I don't know, J.D. Vance and Gavin Newsom, or Donald Trump's hairpiece versus AOC or something like that. And those are the people who I would say where there is potential to build something. Not easy by any means, but potential. Albert, hello to you. You say the USA is 40 times bigger than the UK. However, there are 800 in the Lords, whilst the US has 100 in the Senate. The House of Lords is one of the most ridiculous, corrupt institutions in the world, and even by the ridiculously corrupt standards of the British establishment, it's bad. Like 800 Lords, like just any prime minister is free to appoint any wanker who's given him some money into that place, and they all sit there on £300 a day expenses, collapsed on the red benches, drinking booze. This is like a serious disgrace and a national embarrassment if the British establishment was capable of being embarrassed. They managed to make it even less democratic after its so-called reforms. One of the things that we should be in favour of, not that this would change all that much, but like the level of corruption and authoritarianism and anti-democratic practices in the British state is huge. It's barely a bourgeois democracy, in truth. Because not only is it the case that the country is actually administered by a permanent bureaucracy, not only is it the case that there's barely any difference between the major parties, but also there's so much of the British state which has never been subject to a democratic vote. The fact that there is still a monarchy, the fact that there is still a national church, which, by the way, nobody goes to. The fact that there is a second chamber, which is completely unelected, and by the way, will not change. No matter what Andy Burnham or anybody else says, they will not ever change it because it's too politically useful to be able to stuff it full of people you need to reward. And also, if you tried to change it, all the fat port-swilling arseholes in it at the moment would all scream blue murder. So, this is an establishment which is not only profoundly anti-democratic, which it always has been, but totally corrupt. There's I mean, there's levels. There's always going to be levels of corruption under capitalism, but late stage capitalism in Britain just monumentally corrupt, like, and filled with people who would like sell themselves for like a few £100 and a nice wrap of cocaine, basically. Marius says that's why an understanding of history is important. Long after feudalism was outmoded, the old aristocratic forces fought brutally to hold on to power and even beat the rising bourgeois sometimes. Why would the downfall of modern imperialism be any different? Well, exactly. Like, it's a long, long process, and it may not be particularly pleasant to live through a long, long process or to do work that will not be rewarded in your lifetime. So, like, I'm prepared to accept that everything I do for the rest of my life, politically speaking, might not bear fruit until my daughter is my age. Maybe. But I'll do it anyway. Because there's I see no other decent way to live. Hello to N. Kenchington. Hello to Alm4655. Nadia as well. Rami says, I saw Thatcher salivating over Russia's natural resources. Thatcher wanted to use the British Army to keep Hong Kong. Yeah, well, that was never going to work, was it? You know, how are you going to resupply them? Cosmos points out that NATO Article 5 is not even a call to action. No, it's not. It's a call to definitely do something, maybe. So these are all like games of bluff that they're engaged in. Can you say something about the latest intervention by Paul Cockshott? Asks Boris M. I haven't seen it, so I'll have to look at it, and then I'll be able to say something. I'll make a note to check it. Hello to In It For Fun, Richard V from Las Vegas. Almir says, when it comes to the failures of communist parties, how important are CIA activities for the Congress for Cultural Freedom and other anti-communist actions? And how much is self-inflicted? It's mostly self-inflicted. Look, the CIA and others, and other intelligence agencies will play their games. They will attempt to undermine, destabilize any communist party. That should be a given. You should expect that. That's their job. But the reasons for the failure of the Western communist parties, though, don't lie there. They lie within those communist parties themselves, within their revisionism and their reformism. That's where the problems came. The reason why the French Communist Party actively demobilized the working class in 1968 was because of its reformism. CIA didn't create that. The French Communist Party created it because, essentially, due to social democratic reforms in France and an increasingly pro-reformist line coming from Moscow, they completely got absorbed into the workings of the French state under de Gaulle and after him. And they became bureaucratized and actively hostile to revolution. Same is true in Italy. Again, the CIA did all kinds of things to the communist parties in Europe, but they didn't do that. That was damage done by the communist parties themselves. There is a tendency amongst some to overstate what the CIA did. Now, in some cases, the CIA murdered many communists. The CIA instigated all kinds of slaughters and all kinds of destabilization campaigns. But when it came to the communist parties of Europe, it was their own rottenness that did it. It was the circumstances in those parties that did it. The activities of the intelligence services were not incidental, but they weren't the driving factor behind it. It was the rot of revisionism. That's what caused them to wither away. And we must always bear that in mind. A more correct political line would have seen things turn out very differently in the late 60s and early 70s. It was only because of the revisionist rot that things went the way they did. Wicked Witch says, must take over the unions from within for corrective action and start organising for more labour to join existing corrected unions. Yeah, well, you don't need to fully take over unions to be able to do something with them. Back in the day, like some of the most militant displays came from like building workers, electricians, and other skilled workers sometimes, and unions that were run by like rabid right wingers. But because there was a powerful network of communists in the base of the unions, they often managed to carry out action in defiance of the leadership and end up getting themselves deals that wouldn't have been on the table for a negotiation. So it's not, you don't have to go take over like all the different levels in the union. You just have to have enough communists at ground level to be able to make a change, to be able to reorganize branches, to be able to recruit more workers, to be able to run an action that can stand a chance of success. It's in the base of the unions that the change can be made. Various political YouTubers do a lot of damage and mislead the masses with their reactionary views and garbage analysis of different conflicts. Well, you're rewarded for garbage analysis. That's the thing. You're rewarded for like hysteria. The algorithm rewards certain things. It rewards reactionaries first of all. That's what's pushed most of all, especially on places like X. But you also it also rewards like hysteria and like incoherent screaming and babbling. That's what's also rewarded. Hence the popularity of certain channels who swing between wild optimism and bottomless pits of despair within the same sentence. Is all left parties in the West Fabian globalist, imperialists, warmongers? Well, it depends what you mean by left parties. All the social democrats are completely rotten, but they always were. There's no difference now. It's just that the time when they could offer a few concessions to the Labour aristocracy is all gone. That's gone now. So all that's left is the reactionary pro-imperialist stuff, which again was always there. Yeah, look, most of the left parties, including like the so-called Marxist parties, like relics of the welfare capitalist period. They don't know how to operate in any other way. And so we need to have a new way of operating. More about that later in the week. Alan says it does seem like our system is at least superficially resembling feudalism. No, I don't agree. I think this talk of feudalism is incorrect, and I think people like Varoufakis who put it forward are being very, very foolish. Yes, you have like titanic amounts of wealth concentrated at the top, a lot of which, by the way, is purely fictitious capital based on nothing and based on like overinflated asset prices. So bear that in mind. So when people say, "Oh, Elon Musk's a trillionaire," well, he's probably not, because a lot of that is based on like a massive overinflation of his assets in terms of overvaluation. A lot of it's based on like fictitious capital, so there is a lot of that. So this is a mistake that a lot of people made. This is just how capitalism is in its late stage. So the comparisons to feudalism, to my mind, are apologetics for capitalism. Varoufakis is doing apologetics for capitalism. That's why he's allowed on the Times Radio podcast. You know, he could to sell like his pessimistic drivel. Oh, we are so fucked. Oh, our feudal tech overlords are all so powerful. Oh, capitalism died and got replaced by techno feudalism. I am very smart. Yeah, the bourgeoisie will have you on the radio all day talking about that shit because it's complete bollocks. And if you're going to talk complete bollocks and make Marxism into a fucking joke, they'll have you on the radio. They won't. They won't. They will always have an invitation. You know. Zero respect for due dissidents. Yeah, well, those two are a pair of clowns, and they're a pair of clowns because they refuse to learn anything, and they'll end up, you know, shilling for the next Graham Plattner, basically. Lol says the working class are fucking exhausted. The capitalist class have us where they want us. You mean more exhausted than the working class were in 1850, where the average life expectancy was, in some areas of England, was 21 or 25, where people had to reproduce at the age of 13 because they'd be dead by their early 20s. More exhausted than that? More exhausted than they were when, let's say, for instance, most families had like 6 or 7 children, half of whom died in infancy. More exhausted than when people retired at 50 and then dropped dead. Come on, you know this is exactly what I mean, and I'm singling out you because I'm replying to your comment. But I hear this all the time. Oh, everyone's exhausted. It's like no, look, everyone's distracted. A lot of people do work long hours. That's true. But they worked long hours 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. What, do you think the welfare capitalist period was all fucking bread and roses? People like miners used to work like long shifts underground, you know? And they built like the most militant union and the most effective union for a while in the country, in old perfidious Albion. And these were guys who like worked underground, breathing in coal dust, and came out exhausted at the end of a long shift, not having barely seen the sun. And a lot of those guys became quite theoretically developed, and they built like a solid cadre within their union that powered it from the grassroots to a certain extent. So I don't buy this. There's been plenty of periods in history when workers do incredibly difficult, dirty, dangerous jobs for long, long hours, and yet at the end of the day, some of them, not the majority, but a certain minorities, would go off and read Marx's Capital in a reading group once a week. So I don't buy this at all, because it's not that like everybody's too busy to do it. What it is that there's been such a crisis of leadership and such a crisis of organization for so long that it's become that old tradition has been lost. The tradition of self-improvement, the tradition of wanting to understand things, which the working class did used to have. It's not the working class's fault that this has gone. It's been destroyed by defeats and by the ruling class, but we have to get it back. And this, oh, we're too exhausted, we can't do anything, we're so fucked. Well, if you believe that, why are you here? Why are you here? Go off and distract yourself somewhere else. There's plenty of other channels on YouTube. You know, the job is not easy, but the point about studying history and learning from it is that you see the challenges the class has faced before, and the challenges that the class has overcome, and the difficulties facing the ruling class. So this oh, we're so fucked, we're so fucked, we're so fucked. I can only conclude that some of you positively enjoy this. If so, go and watch the due dissidents guys wail in the wilderness. They'll pour a bowl full of warm shit in your ear. But I'm not here to do that. Stuart Redwood says, it's like being a second string quarterback. You've got to be prepared as though you could see the field at any moment, even if you never do. I don't understand American football, but I do understand the reference. The sporting reference is a good one. People are living longer now and are facing the prospect of spending 20 to 40 years in abject poverty with little to no family support. It depends where you live. Like areas like this one, like where there's settled working class communities, you see a lot of people do get support from their families. You know. I have an interesting technique to suppress sneezing. um, Lawrence Kelly says, agree about due dissidents. They didn't do their due diligence or dissidents about Graham Plattner and are fawning over Mamdani and refusing to learn from their mistakes. Yeah, well, pair of fucking clowns. Pair of fucking clowns. That's all they are. They're hardly alone in that. But like, it appeared for a while as if they were willing to learn something, but no. They just want to go in circles, like screaming and babbling into the wilderness. But Red Fox says the situation in Kashmir is revolutionary. Well, I will have to catch up on that. What's your opinion on the Cuban market reform? Says Hexagon. Yeah, a lot of stuff I got to catch up on, and that's one of them. Karen says my son loves Jenk's nephew. It worries me. Well, youth is a time of foolishness sometimes. 20 years ago, I loved Mikhail Bakunin. You know, I mean, I was a anarchist type, like running around and like spray painting circle A's on walls. Look, it's one of the things that you get into is like you get led down dead ends easily as a young person, and that's the reason why like that clown, that whoremonger, Hassan Piker is promoted, because he's going to lead all these young people down the dead end of the Democratic Party in the end, and he's going to demoralize loads of them. That's why he's promoted, you know. Uh, Hexagon says, is bringing cheaper migrant workers a part of the managing the falling rate of profit, so only labour wages are the only thing left to be slashed. Well, migrant labour, again, it's the same as it's always been. Like they bring in people who can be hyper exploited in a way that like the pre-existing working class in a country can't. The British ruling class has always done this. Like the Ireland was used specifically for this. Marx and Engels commented on it, like their perpetual frustration with like the English working class being bigoted against the Irish was that they were being pitted against each other by the English ruling class, who used Ireland as a source of cheap, hyper exploitable labour. And then when that wasn't as possible anymore, you use the other empire countries for the same purposes, and you play the same game. You bring them in, hyper exploit them, then tell the English worker, look, they're all drunkards and rapists and they're going to take your women, you know? Same tactics over and over again. Again, you read, you will understand everything you need to understand about like the so-called immigration question if you just read like Marx and Engels on like Irish immigration into England in the 1840s, 50s, 60s. You can see the same tactic is applied over and over again for the same reasons by the same class. Again, read the history. If you don't read the history, you will just get either swept up into the silliness of the left, just running around screaming immigrants welcome here while not addressing the material point, or the even sillier reactionary point of view, which is screaming like stop the immigration now and stuff like that, stop the boats, or other blockheaded slogans pumped out by the ruling class. It's all a game. Unless you understand the reasons for migration and the reason why the ruling class neither cannot nor will not ever stop it. And so playing that game, demanding that the ruling class toughen up the borders and claiming that that's going to like benefit the working class, you're playing the ruling class's game, basically, by doing so. Wicked Witch of the Southeast says Marx understood the evolution. Some evolutionary pathways result in dead ends when the environment is right. Others spectacularly succeed. So many times, Stuart Redwood says, so many times I've recommended you and Jyoti Brow as a guest on Due Dissidence, and I'm not the only one to do it, but Keaton gets some jackass market anarchist on for the whole show. Of course he does, because he's a fucking idiot. He wants a nice, comfortable conversation that will mean nothing. He doesn't want, like, somebody who's going to go on there and say, no, you're wrong about that. because I've watched his show. He comes across as a very brittle individual who couldn't take being told that he was wrong about something. He'd probably have a fucking freak out and start screaming. So yeah, he wants some fucking it's the Reverend Morpin or some other fucking dick who's going to tell him the left and right are coming together, or some stupid nonsense like that. Yeah, you know what? You want to fucking drown yourself in that nonsense, then go right ahead. Because again, like they want hot takes that will provide a controversial clip headline and get some views online. And then, as to quote what Comrade Marius said in, I think, the Telegram chat, thank you for the super chat, and move on. That's all they want. Wicked Witch of the Southeast says US unionism was destroyed well over 100 years ago, and their reconstruction from within is the only way they'll begin to bring us forward. Yeah, I mean, I'm not in the US, obviously. I haven't been to the US for almost 30 years. But I would disagree about 100 years ago. I think that the decline, as far as I understand it, started with the impact of the House Un-American Activities Committee basically sticking the boot into all the Communist Party-led unions or influenced unions in the CIO, and then essentially just firmly putting like the Communist the CIO unions under the control of the Democrats. Between that and Taft-Hartley, which again the Democrats did, and the anti-communist purges, they successfully removed communist influence from the trade union movement. And again, like this was very deliberate, very well worked out tactics from the American ruling class. And from their point of view, you can completely understand it, would you ever do debates with YouTube leftists that suck? Yeah, why not? Fuck it. Nadia says the Reverend too. It's my joke term for Caleb Maupin. I refer to him as the Reverend Maupin, as he has now abandoned Marxism and has become like some kind of anti-communist buffoon. He was a buffoon already, but he's become more of one. Hexagon says, too much three-letter agencies, bad actors permeating anarchist circles to convince young people of not organizing. Yeah, anarchist groups are ridiculously easy for the state to manipulate because they have no structure whatsoever. There's I've mentioned it before with the ongoing spy cops inquiry in Britain revealed that like it was ridiculously easy for the undercover police agents to infiltrate anarchist groups or pseudo-anarchist groups. This guy just turn up with a van and enough beer money and be like, hey up lads, I've got a van. And they'd be like, great, you're in. What's your name? Dave. Dave. Now speak here into my lapel and tell me your plans for the revolution, comrades, for I must know them. And what again, this comes back to the idea like some people see that like the activities of the three letter agencies, and admittedly in the United States you've got considerably more secret police agencies to infiltrate and try and destroy communist parties, peace movements, etc. We should always bear in mind that there is no more efficient and brutal intelligence service in the world, secret police service in the world, than the Tsarist Okhrana. They were very good at what they did. They had spies everywhere. They had informants everywhere. They had double agents. They had dirt on everybody. They had people from all of the different revolutionary parties who they turned into double agents, who they were blackmailing. They knew everything that there was to know about these organizations, or thought they did, but it didn't make any difference in the end, because the Bolsheviks managed to organize themselves in such a way as like there were infiltrators in the Bolsheviks, certainly. But in the end, that they had such a strong organization that it was rooted in the militant working class that it didn't matter. The Tsarist state got swept away by the February Revolution, which the Okhrana saw coming but couldn't do anything about it because it was too big, and then further swept away by the October Revolution. So this is the thing, like, infiltration by the state should be expected. It's going to happen. They have whole agencies dedicated to this kind of operation. The way to counter it, though, is by having strong political education. So if some cop wants to infiltrate your organization, he's got to go and read a shitload of Marxism um, uh, that that would at least make his life pretty miserable to do. Well, you never know; it might convert him. And also, like, have a strong work ethic. Like, don't allow just anybody to turn up and immediately be called, like, an organizer or something like that. Um, you have to, like, send them out doing donkey work in ways that, like, will grind them down and, like, frustrate police spies. So at least you get some hard work out of them. Make them go, like, selling papers in a football crowd. See how they do with that. And if they don't turn up, disappear, refuse to do anything, then you found either a lazy, useless bastard or an infiltrator or both. So there's ways to deal with, or at least have structures to counter, police and intelligence service infiltration. You need to take it as read that they're going to try to do it. They might succeed, but you need to have a structure which will negate the damage that they can do, or at least isolate it. Wicked Witch says, we have no parties in the US, so unionization is the way forward. Parties can form within the 10% or so that will be best qualified to organize parties will come from there. Walter says, Morpin calls himself an innovationist nowadays. Sounds like a pyramid scheme. Okay, so we have how many people watching here? 160, 300 odd people. Excellent. Not bad for an early stream. So, just a couple of announcements before we bring things to a close for today. First of all, we have the 2 ongoing series over on Patreon, which are Marxist educational courses. One on Marxist theories of the state, which is ongoing. We've had a couple of episodes of that going very well. It is we're currently studying chapter by chapter Lenin's State and Revolution, followed by a few weeks on Gramsci's State and Civil Society and the Modern Prince. We're going to be doing both of those because I think both of those has to be looked at together. We will also then be doing Ralph Miliband's work on the state. We'll be doing Ernest Mandel's work on the state and Nikos Palantzas' work on the state. So a critical engagement with all of these theories and theorists. So please, if you fancy engaging with that, be sure to join us over on Patreon. And 2 weeks from today, that is the 29th of July, we begin our working through of the great Marxist works of economics, starting with Marx's contribution to a critique of political economy, which is the shorter piece that was meant to be the start of something much longer, but ended up being a very good introduction to several key elements in the Marxist system. So we're going to be starting off by looking at that and analyzing the introduction to that. Introduction to a Critique of Political Economy, 2 weeks' time on Patreon. We also have the Patreon Q&A for all Patreon members coming up tomorrow at this time, actually, or the time we started today is about 5 p.m. The way in which we're approaching that is each week take a different broad group of questions. So tomorrow is going to be the organizational questions Q&A. So submit your organizational questions tomorrow, and I will respond to those on Patreon. We'll be back with you again with a Decline and Fall show later in the week. There'll be more live streams. I'm going to be updating myself on the situation in Kashmir, and we have more interviews for you coming up next week. Thank you to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Thanks to all of those who have tuned in today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and we will beat the algorithm somehow. See you tomorrow. Good night to all of you, except for the YouTube multipolarist shitheads. No good wishes for them. See you later.